Television in the 1950s was supposed to be safe, wholesome, perfect for the whole family. But sometimes, even the most innocent shows crossed lines nobody saw coming. These episodes aired once, horrified audiences, and then disappeared forever, buried so deep that most people forgot they ever existed. The Howdy Doody Show, Buffalo Bob's Breakdown. This one turned America's favorite children's show into a psychological nightmare. Buffalo Bob Smith, the cheerful host kids adored, had what can only be described as a complete mental collapse on live television. He started forgetting character voices mid-sentence, began arguing with Howdy Doody as if the puppet was real, and eventually broke down crying while 50,000 children watched in stunned silence. The episode started normally enough. Buffalo Bob was introducing the day's adventure when his voice suddenly cracked. He stared at Howdy for nearly 30 seconds without speaking, his eyes growing wide and unfocused. When he finally spoke again, his voice was different, darker. He told the peanut gallery that sometimes grown-ups pretend to be happy when they're really scared and alone. NBC pulled the broadcast during a commercial break, but the damage was done. Parents flooded the network with angry calls. Child psychologists warned about the traumatic impact on young viewers. The network claimed Buffalo Bob had been suffering from exhaustion, but insiders whispered about personal problems and prescription medication. The episode never aired in reruns, and NBC destroyed the master tape within a week. Father Knows Best, the Anderson family secret. The Andersons were America's perfect family until this episode revealed they were hiding something that shattered their wholesome image. Jim Anderson, the wise patriarch, confessed to his children that their deceased grandfather had been committed to a mental institution after attempting to harm his own family. The revelation came during what should have been a heartwarming dinner conversation. Betty Anderson asked about family history for a school project, and Jim's facade cracked. He explained that mental illness ran in their bloodline, that their grandfather had violent episodes, and that Jim himself sometimes felt the same dark impulses. Jane Wyatt's Margaret sat frozen as Robert Young delivered the monologue with terrifying sincerity. The episode was supposed to tackle mental health awareness, but it went too far. Jim described his father's breakdown in graphic detail, explaining how the man had threatened his wife with a kitchen knife during a Christmas dinner. The show ended with Jim wondering aloud if his own children were safe around him. CBS received thousands of complaint letters within 24 hours. Mental health advocates protested the stigmatizing portrayal. The episode was yanked from the schedule permanently, and the network ordered all copies destroyed. Even today, no recording exists in any archive. The Lone Ranger, Tonto's Revenge. This episode flipped the show's entire dynamic when Tonto finally snapped and turned against his faithful companion. After years of being called names and treated as a sidekick, Jay Silverheel's character delivered a brutal speech about racism and betrayal that left audiences speechless. The Lone Ranger's mask came off, both literally and figuratively. The story began with the duo tracking outlaws, but something was different about Tonto's behavior. He questioned every decision, spoke in complete sentences instead of broken English, and eventually confronted the Lone Ranger about their partnership. The confrontation escalated when Tonto accused his partner of using him as a servant while taking all the credit for their heroics. The climax was devastating. Tonto removed the Lone Ranger's mask on camera, revealing the actor underneath, and told him to go back to his fancy house while real Native Americans suffered on reservations. He mounted Silver and rode away, leaving the unmasked hero standing alone in the desert. ABC executives watched the broadcast in horror. The episode was meant to address criticism about the show's portrayal of Native Americans, but it destroyed the series' mythology. The network never aired it again, and Clayton Moore later claimed the episode never existed. The script disappeared from all files. I Love Lucy, Lucy's Miscarriage, the most shocking episode in television history, dealt with pregnancy loss in a way that traumatized an entire generation. Lucille Ball's character suffered a miscarriage on screen, complete with realistic medical details that sent viewers rushing to turn off their sets. CBS had approved the storyline as a very special episode, but never anticipated the brutal realism Ball would bring to the performance. The episode started with Lucy excitedly preparing for her second baby when she began experiencing severe cramping. Ricky rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. The show depicted her physical and emotional pain with unflinching honesty, showing Lucy screaming in agony while doctors delivered the devastating news. Ball's performance was so convincing that hospitals reported a surge in emergency room visits from pregnant women who became terrified after watching. The episode included graphic dialogue about blood loss and medical procedures that shocked 1950s audiences. Lucy's final scene, where she stared emptily at the baby clothes she had bought, left millions of viewers in tears. Sponsor Philip Morris threatened to pull all advertising if the episode ever aired again. CBS immediately removed it from syndication and destroyed all copies. Ball herself never spoke about the episode publicly, and co-star Desi Arnaz claimed it was too painful to remember. The topic became taboo in Hollywood for decades. The Ed Sullivan Show, the Blacklist special, Sullivan decided to confront McCarthyism head-on by booking an entire lineup of blacklisted performers for one explosive episode. The show featured actors, writers, and musicians who had been banned from television due to alleged communist sympathies. What was meant as a statement against censorship became a political firestorm that nearly destroyed Sullivan's career. The lineup included Zero Mostel, Pete Seeger, and Gypsy Rose Lee, all performing material that directly challenged the House Un-American Activities Committee. Seeger performed protest songs about workers' rights, while Mostel delivered a comedy routine mocking Senator Joseph McCarthy by name. The audience sat in stunned silence as performer after performer took shots at the political establishment. The most shocking moment came when playwright Arthur Miller appeared via remote feed from London, reading from a banned play about the Salem witch trials. Miller explicitly compared the communist witch hunt to historical persecution, naming names of politicians and media figures who had destroyed innocent careers. CBS cut the broadcast during Miller's speech, but not before millions witnessed the most direct challenge to McCarthyism ever aired. Government officials contacted the network within hours, threatening license revocation. Sullivan was forced to apologize publicly and promised never to book controversial acts again. The episode was buried so thoroughly that many historians doubt it actually aired. Captain Video and his Video Rangers, The Mind Control Experiment. This children's science fiction show took a dark turn when Captain Video subjected his young sidekicks to psychological experiments that resembled real-world brainwashing techniques. The episode was meant to warn kids about the dangers of manipulation, but instead demonstrated actual mind control methods that terrified parents and child development experts. The story followed Captain Video as he investigated alien technology that could alter human thoughts. To test the device's effects, he used it on the Video Rangers, showing how their personalities changed as their memories were erased and replaced. The demonstration was so realistic that children watching began questioning their own thoughts and memories. The episode included step-by-step instructions for psychological manipulation, including sleep deprivation, repetitive messaging, and isolation techniques. Captain Video explained each method in detail while demonstrating on his young assistants, who became increasingly robotic and compliant as the show progressed. Dumont Network received frantic calls from parents whose children began exhibiting strange behavior after watching. Some kids refused to sleep, claiming they were afraid their dreams would be stolen. Others began speaking in monotone voices, mimicking the controlled Video Rangers. Child psychologists condemned the episode as harmful propaganda disguised as entertainment. The network pulled the episode after one airing and fired the writing staff responsible. All copies were ordered destroyed, and Dumont issued a public apology. The incident contributed to increased scrutiny of children's programming and led to the first industry standards for youth-oriented content. Ozzie and Harriet, the Nelson family divorce. America's most wholesome family shattered the illusion when Ozzie and Harriet announced their divorce on live television. The episode was filmed during a real marital crisis, and audiences watched in horror as the couple's genuine animosity played out on screen. What was supposed to be a typical family sitcom became a brutal domestic drama that destroyed the show's reputation. The episode began with typical Nelson family hijinks, but the tension between Ozzie and Harriet was palpable. their dialogue became increasingly hostile, with real grievances bleeding through the scripted material. By the second act, they were openly arguing about money, career decisions, and their children's welfare, while the laugh track played awkwardly in the background. The climax came when Harriet announced she was leaving Ozzy and taking the boys with her. Ozzy's response was vicious, accusing her of using their children as weapons and threatening to fight for custody. David and Ricky Nelson sat frozen as their parents destroyed each other on national television, their faces showing genuine confusion and pain. ABC executives watched the broadcast in mounting panic as viewer complaints flooded the switchboard. The episode ended with Ozzy storming off the set, leaving Harriet alone with their sons in an empty living room. The network immediately announced the show was going on hiatus, though privately they knew it could never recover from such a public breakdown. The Cisco Kid, Blood on the Range. This typically lighthearted Western turned into a bloodbath when the Cisco Kid and Pancho encountered a massacre scene that pushed the boundaries of 1950s television violence. The episode featured graphic depictions of death that traumatized young viewers and horrified parents expecting harmless cowboy adventures. The story began when the duo discovered an entire family slaughtered in their homestead, including children whose bodies were shown on camera. The Cisco Kid's investigation revealed the killers were still nearby, leading to a pursuit that culminated in brutal gunfights where men died screaming in agony instead of falling peacefully like typical TV cowboys. The most shocking scene showed Pancho discovering a murdered infant in a burned crib, holding the tiny body while weeping. The camera lingered on the child's face, showing details that would be considered inappropriate even by today's standards. The Cisco Kid's vengeance was equally brutal, torturing information from captured killers using methods that belonged in horror films, not children's entertainment. Ziv television programs received hundreds of angry letters from parents and pressure groups. The episode was meant to address real frontier violence honestly, but it crossed every line of acceptable content for family programming. Sponsors threatened to withdraw support, and several stations refused to air the show until they received assurance that such content would never appear again. The Honeymooners. Ralph's gambling problem. Jackie Gleason's Ralph Cramden revealed a dark addiction that destroyed his marriage and friendships in this devastating episode that was too real for 1950s audiences. The show depicted gambling addiction with brutal honesty, showing Ralph losing everything while his desperation grew increasingly pathetic and dangerous. The episode opened with Ralph secretly betting his rent money on horse races, lying to Alice about his whereabouts while accumulating massive debts. As his losses mounted, he began stealing from his bus company's cash box and pawning Alice's wedding ring, all while maintaining the bluster that typically made his character lovable. The climax came when loan sharks appeared at the Cramden apartment, threatening Alice's safety unless Ralph paid immediately. The scene was terrifyingly realistic, with the thugs describing in detail what would happen to Alice if Ralph didn't deliver. Ralph's breakdown was complete as he begged on his knees, offering to sell anything, do anything to protect his wife. CBS executives realized they had crossed into territory too dark for comedy. The episode ended with Ralph in a police station, arrested for theft, while Alice sat alone in their empty apartment, her wedding ring gone and their future destroyed. The network buried the episode immediately, claiming the content was inappropriate for their comedy format. Texaco Star Theater. Milton Berle's nervous breakdown. Uncle Milty's famous drag comedy took a disturbing turn when Milton Berle's mental state deteriorated on live television, blurring the line between performance and genuine psychological crisis. What started as typical vaudeville entertainment became a horrifying display of a performer losing touch with reality while millions watched helplessly. The show began normally with Berle's trademark dress routine, but something was wrong with his timing and delivery. His jokes became increasingly incoherent, and he began responding to voices only he could hear. When the audience laughed, he accused them of mocking his pain rather than enjoying his humor, breaking character completely. The most disturbing moment came when Berle, still in full drag, began crying uncontrollably while delivering what was supposed to be a comedy monologue. He spoke about feeling trapped inside a character he hated, about sacrificing his dignity for laughs, and about wanting to disappear forever. The studio audience sat in uncomfortable silence as America's comedy king unraveled on live television. NBC cut to a commercial break that lasted 15 minutes, while network executives decided how to handle the crisis. When the show returned, a network announcer explained that Mr. Burrell was experiencing technical difficulties and the program would continue next week. Burley never appeared on television again, and the network claimed the episode was lost due to technical problems. Mama. Papa's Dark Secret. The Norwegian immigrant family that warmed America's heart revealed a devastating secret when Papa Hansen confessed to crimes committed in the old country. The episode transformed from heartwarming family drama into a war crimes tribunal that left audiences questioning everything they thought they knew about their beloved characters. The revelation came during a family dinner when young Katrin asked about Papa's life in Norway before coming to America. Papa's face changed completely as he admitted to participating in violence against Jewish families during wartime, claiming he had no choice but revealing details that made his actions seem calculated rather than coerced. The most shocking moment came when Mama confronted Papa about his lies, revealing she had known the truth all along but kept silent to protect their children. The argument that followed was brutal, with Papa defending his actions while Mama accused him of bringing evil into their home. Their children watched in horror as their perfect family disintegrated. CBS received immediate backlash from Jewish organizations and veterans groups who demanded the episode be removed from air permanently. The network complied, destroying all copies and issuing a public apology. The incident effectively ended the series, as audiences could never again view the Hansen family as innocent immigrants pursuing the American dream. The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show. Gracie's Mental Hospital. Gracie Allen's trademark confusion took a dark turn when George had her committed to a mental institution after becoming convinced her bizarre behavior was genuine illness rather than comedy. The episode was meant to explore mental health awareness, but instead became a terrifying depiction of psychiatric abuse that traumatized viewers. The show began with typical Gracie logic, but George's reactions were different, clinical and concerned rather than amused. He consulted with doctors about Gracie's behavior, leading to scenes of medical professionals discussing her case as if she were truly mentally ill rather than a comedic character. The transition from comedy to drama was jarring and uncomfortable. The most disturbing sequence showed Gracie in a psychiatric ward, confused and frightened, as she was subjected to treatments that were presented as standard medical care, but looked like torture to audiences. Her attempts to explain her logic were met with sedation and restraint, creating a horrifying parallel to real-world psychiatric abuse. CBS executives realized they had created a nightmare that destroyed the show's comedic foundation. Audiences could never again laugh at Gracie's confusion after seeing her treated as mentally ill. The episode was pulled immediately, and the network announced that Mrs. Allen needed rest for her health, though privately they knew the character could never recover from such brutal treatment. The Jack Benny program, Jack's tax evasion trial. America's beloved cheapskate revealed that his penny-pinching ways had crossed into criminal territory when the IRS prosecuted him for massive tax evasion. The episode showed Jack Benny facing real legal consequences while maintaining his comedic persona, creating a disturbing disconnect between humor and criminal behavior. The trial scenes were brutally realistic, with prosecutors detailing how Benny had hidden income, falsified expenses, and bribed officials to avoid paying taxes. His attempts to make jokes fell flat, as the judge threatened him with prison time and financial ruin. The contrast between his comedic image and the serious charges created an uncomfortable viewing experience. The most shocking revelation came when the prosecution produced evidence that Benny had been avoiding taxes for decades, not just being cheap, but actively defrauding the government. His famous vault was revealed to contain hidden cash and falsified documents rather than empty shelves, destroying the innocent foundation of his comedic character. CBS pulled the episode after receiving pressure from the Treasury Department, who claimed it made tax evasion seem like a joke rather than a serious crime. The network destroyed all copies and issued a statement that the episode was experimental content that didn't meet their standards. Benny's career recovered, but his image was permanently tainted for those who saw the broadcast. Dragnet. the racist cop. Jack Webb's by-the-book detective revealed his prejudices in an episode that exposed police racism with shocking honesty. The story followed Joe Friday as he investigated crimes in minority neighborhoods, showing how his supposedly objective police work was contaminated by racial bias that led to wrongful arrests and police brutality. The episode began with Friday responding to a robbery in a black neighborhood, but his investigation was clouded by assumptions and stereotypes. Webb played the scene straight, showing how Friday's supposed professionalism masked deep-seated racism that affected every aspect of his police work. The character's signature monotone delivery made his prejudice statements even more chilling. The climax came when Friday arrested an innocent black man based purely on racial profiling, ignoring evidence that pointed to the real perpetrator. The scene showed the arrest in graphic detail, including police violence that was presented as standard procedure rather than abuse. Friday's partner, Bill Gannon, participated willingly, showing how racism was institutionalized throughout the police force. NBC executives panicked as civil rights organizations condemned the episode for exposing uncomfortable truths about police behavior. The network claimed the episode was meant to criticize racism, but realized it had instead normalized police brutality. The episode was banned immediately, and Webb was forced to issue a public apology, claiming the content didn't represent his personal views. Sky King, the Poison Sky. This wholesome aviation adventure turned into an environmental nightmare when Sky King discovered that aircraft were spreading toxic chemicals that were killing wildlife and threatening human health. The episode revealed corporate conspiracies and government cover-ups that were too controversial for 1950s family programming. The story began when Sky King investigated reports of dead birds and sick livestock near an airfield, leading him to discover that planes were secretly spraying experimental chemicals as part of a government weapons program. The investigation revealed that officials knew the chemicals were dangerous, but continued the program to test biological warfare agents on unsuspecting populations. The most shocking scenes showed the effects of chemical exposure on animals and humans, including graphic depictions of illness and death that were inappropriate for children's television. Sky King's attempts to expose the truth were met with threats and attempts on his life, showing how far the conspiracy reached into government and military organizations. The episode was pulled after the Defense Department contacted NBC, claiming the content threatened national security. Environmental groups praised the episode's message but couldn't prevent its removal from the air. All copies were confiscated and destroyed, and the cast was warned never to discuss the episode publicly. The incident contributed to increased military oversight of television content. The Perry Como Show, Perry's Pills. America's most relaxed entertainer revealed the source of his famous calm when he discussed his dependence on prescription medications during what was supposed to be a lighthearted variety show. The episode became a confessional about celebrity drug abuse that shocked audiences expecting easy entertainment. Como's performance was noticeably different from his usual smooth delivery, with slurred words and erratic timing that suggested he was under the influence during the broadcast. Between songs, he spoke candidly about taking pills to manage anxiety, depression, and the pressure of constant performance, revealing a dark side to his mellow public image. The most disturbing moment came when Como forgot the words to his signature song, staring blankly at the camera for nearly a minute, before admitting he was confused and didn't know where he was. His backing musicians tried to cover for him, but the situation became increasingly uncomfortable as Como rambled about feeling trapped in his career. NBC executives realized they were witnessing a public breakdown rather than a planned performance. The network cut the broadcast early and announced that Como was suffering from exhaustion, though privately they knew his problems were more serious. The episode was buried completely, and Como entered treatment while the network covered up the incident. Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, the Broken Dreams special. The beloved talent show took a devastating turn when Arthur Godfrey revealed the dark side of show business by following up with previous contestants who had failed to achieve success. The episode showed broken dreams, financial ruin, and personal destruction that contradicted the show's optimistic message about pursuing stardom. Godfrey interviewed former contestants who had left their jobs and families to pursue entertainment careers based on their television appearances, only to find themselves unemployed and desperate. The segments were brutally honest about the entertainment industry's cruelty, showing how false hope had destroyed real lives. The most heartbreaking story featured a young singer who had been promised a recording contract after winning the show, only to discover the offer was fake. She had quit her job and moved to New York based on the promise, ending up homeless and working in a factory while still trying to break into show business despite obvious signs she lacked the talent to succeed. CBS executives realized the episode destroyed the show's entire premise by revealing that most contestants would fail despite their television success. Audiences couldn't continue believing in the American dream of overnight stardom after seeing the devastating reality. The episode was removed from syndication, and the show's format was changed to avoid following up with contestants. The Abbott and Costello Show, Who's Killing Who? The comedy duo's wordplay routine turned deadly when their famous Who's On First became a murder mystery that left bodies piling up while they continued their verbal confusion. The episode blended their trademark comedy with genuine horror, creating a surreal experience that traumatized young viewers. The story began with Abbott and Costello investigating murders at a baseball stadium, but their confusion about names and identities allowed the killer to claim more victims while they argued about semantics. Each death was shown graphically, with the comedy duo stepping over bodies while continuing their routine as if nothing had happened. The most disturbing scene showed Costello discovering a corpse in the equipment room, screaming in terror before immediately forgetting about it and launching into another Who's On First routine with Abbott. The contrast between comedy and horror created a nightmarish atmosphere that confused audiences about whether they should laugh or be frightened. The episode was meant to parody horror films, but the execution was too realistic for family audiences. Children who watched were confused and frightened by the mixture of comedy and violence, while adults found the material inappropriate for the duo's usual wholesome image. The network pulled the episode after one airing and never acknowledged its existence. Life with Father. Father's War Stories. The Gentle Family patriarch revealed his violent past when he shared detailed stories about killing enemy soldiers during wartime. What was meant to be a patriotic episode about military service became a graphic war memoir that traumatized children and horrified parents expecting wholesome family entertainment. The episode began with young Clarence asking about Father's military service, leading to flashbacks that showed graphic combat scenes inappropriate for family television. Father described killing enemies with disturbing detail, explaining how bayonet fighting felt and what men looked like when they died, all while maintaining his usual authoritative demeanor. The most shocking moment came when Father admitted he enjoyed killing during wartime, describing the rush of combat and the satisfaction of defeating enemies. His confession that he sometimes missed the violence contrasted sharply with his gentle family image, revealing a dark side that couldn't be reconciled with his role as loving patriarch. CBS received hundreds of complaints from parents who felt the episode glorified violence and traumatized their children. Veterans organizations protested the graphic descriptions of combat, claiming they were inappropriate for civilian audiences. The network removed the episode immediately and issued apologies to viewers who had been disturbed by the content. The Philco Television Playhouse, The Perfect Child. This anthology drama presented a story about genetic experimentation on children that was too disturbing for 1950s audiences. The episode followed scientists who were breeding perfect children in laboratory conditions, revealing unethical medical practices that paralleled real-world controversies about human experimentation. The story showed children being subjected to psychological and physical tests designed to enhance their intelligence and abilities, but the methods were clearly abusive. The young actors portrayed genuine fear and confusion as they were separated from families and subjected to procedures that resembled torture more than education. The most horrifying revelation came when the children discovered they were not the first group of test subjects, finding evidence of previous experiments that had failed catastrophically. The episode implied that many children had died during the research, while survivors were left permanently damaged by the procedures they had endured. NBC executives realized the episode hit too close to real controversies about medical ethics and human experimentation. The network received calls from medical organizations condemning the portrayal of scientists as evil, while child welfare groups protested the use of young actors in such disturbing material. The episode was pulled from all future broadcasts and destroyed. These episodes prove that even in television's most innocent era, creators were willing to push boundaries that society wasn't ready to cross. Which of these lost episodes would you most want to see today? And more importantly, do you think we've gone too far in the opposite direction, sanitizing family entertainment until it loses all meaning and power?